Well, this season for Toronto FC has been miserable. Reliving Danny Coverman's statement back in 2012, we're the worst team in the world. And honestly, right now, it feels like that statement fits more for this Toronto FC team than it did for the one in 2012. Two separate coaches were sitting last place in the league with a 3-6-14 record, good for 15 points from 24 games, a goal differential of -23, one losing streak of 6 games to end Chris Armas's tenure as TFC head coach, and now a second losing skid of 5 games currently, for 2 losing skids, which combine for 11 losses this season. And no player on Toronto FC so far this season has scored more than 3 goals in MLS. It's just been a brutal year, and honestly, it's been a pinnacle of poor performance in Major League Soccer for Toronto FC. So, if one thing is abundantly clear right now, it's that what we have going on right now, what this roster is right now, it's not working, and a major shakeup needs to happen in the offseason. So, this season's a write-off. This offseason, what does Toronto FC need to do? What has to happen right now this winter for Toronto FC to come back in 2022 and be a competitive team in MLS like they have been over the past several years? So first off, positionally, right now what is fine for Toronto FC? What doesn't really have to be touched? Goalkeepers, Bono, Westberg, that's a pretty solid goalkeeping duo in MLS. Yes, Westberg's been a bit off this season, but Bono has had a couple of good games. A return to form from Westberg, you're fine. I think Bono and Westberg, that's fine moving forward. Right back, you have Larrea and Aro. That's fine. Richie Larrea is fantastic at right back. Aro Jr. is a very solid secondary right back. The only way that could go south is if Larrea goes away to Europe in this winter, in which case you'd have to bring in a new starting right back to replace him. At attacking midfield, you have Pozuelo. Osorio can also play there. That's fine. Pozuelo has had a bit of an off season, has had some trouble with injuries, but right now, Pozuelo, Osorio, and then you can rotate some other guys through in those roles. That's fine in the cam role. You don't really need to change anything there. And also you don't really need to change anything at left wing. Soteldo is good. I feel like you just need to get him proper strikers who are able to do better, because a lot of people are complaining about how Soteldo doesn't do much, but also his service right now is going to Patrick Mullins. So I feel like once you get Soteldo a striker who can consistently score and can actually do things and get into position, you're in a pretty good spot. And then also on that left side, you have Jacob Schaffelberg as a depth option. You have Jaden Nelson as a depth option. The left side, left wing, is actually fine right now. That just needs a little bit of time for those young guys to develop. Besides that, though, a lot of changes got to get made. First off, I think the biggest change that has to be made is something with the fitness team. Because for Toronto FC, a problem going back a couple seasons now has been our ability to stay healthy. Altidore, we all know that he has been a mess of injuries on and off for the past several years. But also this season in particular, we've had Chris Mavinga missing significant time with injury. Pozuelo has been on and off injured all season. Soteldo missed time with injury. Akinola, yes, that injury happened at the Gold Cup, but he's out for the rest of the season. Ralph Priso out for the rest of the season. Achara was out for over a year, came back midway through this season. Westberg's missed time. Bono has missed time. Just so many key players. Justin Morrow, again, another guy who's had consistent injury problems over the last few years. It seems like Toronto FC always has a couple of guys who are just always injured. And for an MLS team where your bill is so top heavy, where really you don't have the money capabilities, you don't have the financial capabilities to have significantly very strong rotation players who can just slide into your starting 11. Your starting 11 is kind of what you got. So when significant parts of your starting 11 are gone and hurt, in MLS, that's disastrous. And for Toronto FC the past couple seasons, that's been something that's been happening a lot. So I don't know what's been going on with the training team, with a fitness team for Toronto FC, but right now, looking at this season, that is probably the single biggest area of concern. Is you just can't succeed when your star players like Pozuelo, like Mavinga are constantly out hurt, and constantly when they do play, recovering and trying to get back up to match tempo from recent injuries. But player-wise, what needs to change? Center, back, center, back, center, back. Since the 2019 run, Chris Mavinga has been a clear, great defender in MLS, and then next to him on the center back line has been a mess. Gonzalez, great in 2019 when we first got him, and since then it's been a steep drop-off. He's not good enough to be a starting center back in MLS. I'm not even sure if he's good enough to be a regularly used center back in MLS. Eric Zavaleta, I mean, nothing else really has to be said. We all know that he just, on the average day, is not good enough. He has a couple of good games here or there, but generally, he's not good enough for Toronto FC. He's not playing a good enough role for Toronto FC. Beyond those three, Luke Singh, he's a promising young player. And then you have Julian, Dunn, and Rocco Romejo, who, with all the trouble Toronto FC has had at center back this season, the fact that we have not seen Dunn and Romejo, even heard of Dunn and Romejo being possibly close to the first team, just suggests to me that they're never going to make it. And it suggests to me that they're just not at the level required. And if they're not even on the radar, like, why are we still hanging them around? They've been around for a couple of years and they're still on the radar. I think it might be time to let them go. So at center back, Chris Mavinga has to stay. He's great. Luke Singh, he should stick around. He has got good potential. Everyone else, get rid of. You need a new starting center back. You need a proper starting center back next to Chris Mavinga. That's a big thing you got to bring in this offseason, is a new starting center back. And then a new one or two backup center backs to go along with Luke Singh. Just guys who are better than Zavaleta, who are useful on the bench, please. Left back, too, has been an issue for Toronto FC. Justin Morrow's gotten older. He's been injured on and off. Yes, he was crucial to the 2017 run for Toronto FC, but Justin Morrow is not anywhere close to 2017 Justin Morrow anymore. He's taken a major fall off. He doesn't have to leave the club. He's probably a great figure to have in the room, but he's a guy that, if he is going to be kept around, has to be in an incredibly reduced role. He should not be a regular starter. He should not probably even be getting regular substitute appearances anymore. Keep him around. He's a great option still, but he needs to be in a reduced role. And Kamar Lawrence, he was a big get for Toronto FC, and he's fully underperformed, I think, in my opinion. He just hasn't been good. He hasn't been great. He hasn't really shown anything. He's just kind of been there. Does he have to go? I guess depends on how much his salary expenditure is. But I think it is high, and honestly, I think you might have to get rid of Lawrence, bring in another new left back. You need a new starting left back. That's another thing that you just need. You need a guy who could play that left side consistently well, or you need Kamar Lawrence to have a resurgence of form. One of those two things has to happen, and if you don't have faith in Kamar Lawrence this offseason, you got to go out and you got to get a new guy. Center midfield. Ralph Priso looks really good. Ralph Priso looks like he is going to be a very, very good player for Toronto FC. It's a shame that he's out for the rest of the season with injury, and it makes Toronto FC's center midfield look worse than it is right now. Marquis Delgado is another option who's been consistent. He's been useful for Toronto FC for years and years and years. I think he should stick around. Michael Bradley. He's the captain. He's still useful, but again, he's another guy like Justin Morrow whose role needs to be reduced if he's kept around. It's either you got to get rid of him or you got to significantly reduce his role, but keep him around to still be a useful figure in the dressing room. Liam Frazier is an interesting one here because he's playing well in Columbus this season. He's getting actual play time there. He was making appearances for the Canadian national team in the Gold Cup. So for Frazier, it comes to a question of, does Toronto FC decide we actually want to play Liam Frazier? Are we actually going to use Liam Frazier? And is Liam Frazier willing to give Toronto another chance after we kind of stifled his development a bit? I don't know. If Frazier doesn't come back, you definitely need to do something in the midfield. You need to get some other center midfielder. You also got to hope that Noble Okello can develop a bit more, because right now it's looking like, of this crop of young guys, Ralph Priso, he looks great. Everyone else is kind of not as good as I think we thought. Two last positions that need overhauls. Right wing, this is a mess of a position. Really, we haven't had a right winger. I mean, Pablo Piatti was on right wing, but besides that brief stint of Pablo Piatti, since in 2019, when we started trying to play with wingers, we haven't had a proper guy on the right side. Endo, De Leon have both stepped up in that role. They brought in Erickson Gallardo to try and fill that role, and that was, yeah. Gallardo's got to go. That's another guy who, I mean, I think he's still in the organization, but he's on a TAM contract. He has to go. He just was not good enough for Toronto FC. De Leon, I think, has said that he has to leave at the end of the season due to some family stuff. And Endo's a useful servant for the club, fan favorite, but I don't think he is a regular starter in MLS. He has flashes. He's a useful depth piece, but he's not the guy you need to start. TFC right now desperately need a solid TAM level starting right winger. Desperately. That's the play that they need to get to just to solidify the offense on all ends of the field. And then probably the biggest area for concern right now beyond center back is at striker. Now, this season for Toronto FC, striker has been pretty disastrous. Now, take into account that Ayo Akinola getting hurt in the Gold Cup, missing the remainder of the season, is a huge D factor to TFC, as that's your number one striker just gone. Jozy Altidore, it has to be over. Injured every second game. Like, Jozy Altidore literally will be injured for 2 months, come back, play 20 minutes, and then get injured again. And half the time he'll score in that 20 minutes. Like, obviously, the skill and the talent is still there for Jozy Altidore. The instinct is still there for Jozy Altidore. But it's just a matter of his fitness is just disastrous at this point. You can't keep him around, especially on a DP deal, especially paying him $6 million plus a year. It's insane how Jozy Altidore has been able to get away with this contract for as long as he has. And like, the guy is a Toronto FC legend. The 2017 run, the 2018 Champions League run, nothing will change the fact that Jozy Altidore is a Toronto FC legend. But as Two-Face said, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And Jozy Altidore, his tenure at TFC, has lasted long enough that he has become a bit of the villain. And as fortunate as it is, it's the reality of the situation for Altidore at TFC, as I think if he leaves this offseason, if it's by mutual consent, if he leaves this offseason, he's salvaged as a TFC legend. And I think nothing changes the fact that he's a TFC legend. I think 10 years from now, we're going to look back at Jozy Altidore with fond memories. But the longer he stays at Toronto, the longer he takes up a DP spot, the more he taints his legacy. He has to go. As sad as it is, Jozy Altidore cannot take up an all-important designated player spot for Toronto FC next season. The other two strikers for Toronto FC this season, well, okay, Peruksa kind of, but not really, are Dwyer and Mullins, who are useless. Both terrible. Mullins hasn't had a shot on target yet this season. Dom Dwyer, has he done anything? Like, wow, last night's game, Dwyer and Mullins, the two starting strikers up top in a 4-4-2, were completely invisible. So, Dwyer, Mullins, Altidore, all gotta go. You can bring in a new designated player striker to allow Soteldo and Pozuelo to set him up, restart all three of them right off the bat like that. That would be great. And then get another possible depth striker option, maybe get in another young guy. I mean, Achara actually is a great option as a number 3 guy. I don't even think you need to bring in another depth option. You just run a DP striker, Akinola, Achara, Peruksa. That's great. That right there, that's golden. Achara's really good, honestly. Achara is a guy who hasn't played enough professionally because of that big-ass injury, but right now, in this stage of TFC season, he's been the only real bright spot the past few games. So, Achara, great 3 option. Akinola, he's great. He's a fantastic number 2 option if you get a number 1 DP striker. But that has to happen. Altidore, Dwyer, Mullins, all gotta go. So, as you can see, there's a lot of things that are wrong with TFC. From coaching to personnel to the product on the field, just to the general compete level right now. And honestly, I think everything needs a full reset almost. Javier Perez, it was his coaching job to win for next season, and he's 1 loss away from tying Armas's losing skid. of 6 games. And I think now 2 coaches in a row where it's their first real starting coaching job at MLS or at that sort of level now with TFC, and they've both kind of failed. I think it's time. I know Toronto FC historically, Vanny, Armas, Perez all have been guys who are assistants who they decided to make starting coaches. I think it's time that Toronto FC, just to get out of this rut, in addition to the personnel changes I'm suggesting, you need a new coach, and I think you need an experienced coach. I think you need to bring in a guy who you know what you're getting. You can't bring in another coach right now with this situation that Toronto FC's in, with how bad they've been this season. You need results next year. And so you need to bring in a coach that you know has succeeded. Now that's no guarantee that the team will succeed. But if you bring in a coach that is a recognizable name, that the fans know, have seen succeed elsewhere, then at least you can say, well, then it's the players that are faltering because this is the 3rd straight coach you've given them. But I think you need everything. I think you need new players, you need a better coach, you need a lot of things to change for this Toronto FC squad. And this winter is, for Ali Curtis, make or break. You either get this team back into a playoff spot, get this team back into being close to contending for MLS Cup, or get out and get a new GM in. Because honestly, the departure of Tim Bezbatchenko and the arrival of Ali Curtis kind of was the start of the end for Toronto FC that kind of led up to this season. We kind of saw this coming. With the 2020 run near the end, they started to burn out. And then at the beginning of this season, and just like the moves that were being made, there wasn't enough youth being injected into the lineup. And so the burnout over 2020, looking at the lineup that they had, wasn't surprising. And then the fact that it led into this season, honestly, as high as the hopes were for this season at the beginning, as excited as we were when we got Soteldo, when we got Lawrence, for every Soteldo signing, for every Lawrence signing, there was a Mullins, there was a Dwyer, there was a Gallardo, there was a move that just made us go, why? And honestly, Curtis has just shown a resistance to fully changing things. I think as important as it was for this club, management finally has to realize that it's not 2017 anymore. That was 4 years ago. And despite the fact that a lot of things have changed since that 2017 team, a lot of the players have changed since the 2017 team, there's still a few key pieces that are being held on to and are still taking up big contracts at this club and still taking up spots on this club. And I think it's time for management to recognize that they have to move on. So that is it for this video. Those are the moves that I think Toronto FC has to make this offseason. It should be, if they do what they're supposed to do, possibly the most exciting offseason in Toronto FC history. But we have to slog through a couple more months of terrible, given up regular season to get there. I don't even know if I'm going to watch the rest of this season, really. But, hey, Canadian Championship's coming up, so we might get something. If we lose to York, it's a full-on disaster. That does it for this video. If you liked it, hit like. If you want to see more of my stuff, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Link is down below in the description, and I will see you next time.